we have in back of me here, I know you can't hear very well with the noisy road in back of us. Now back of us, this is Baltimore Pike. Now again, I'm on the battlefield property itself, the state-owned battlefield property. Now, during the winter time when I would start to make the videos, this battlefield was closed. It was slated for dismissal by the Pennsylvania State Legislature, but through donations of local and individuals from the Chatsford Historical Society, this battlefield is open 3 days during the summertime now. Today, we're going to be looking at a couple structures on the property I couldn't basically film. This structure you see behind me, this is Lafayette's headquarters during the Battle of Brandywine. He stayed here probably when Washington arrived around September 3rd. Now the owner of this building was a Mr. Gilpin. He was a farmer. He was one of the original landowners in the area. He owned about 100 to 200 acres of land this side and also on the other side of Baltimore Pike near Chad's Ford. Now Mr. Gilpin came over, he was a Quaker. If you notice the building behind me, it's this Quaker structure. It's very square, it has square windows. It has a porch on the front. Now this is exactly what it looked like during the battle. There's nothing's changed here. Now during the 1960s, this building was restored. It was restored to the original condition during the battle. What you see is paint, red paint. That was a very common color in Chester County. Red pigment was the cheapest pigment that you can buy for a home. Whitewash was expensive. They didn't have very much of it. So he painted his house with red. Now, a couple other interesting aspects is this was a working farm. It was actually a farm that you would see anywhere else in Lancaster County. He had sheep, he had goats, he had milking cows. Now, during the battle and after the battle, we'll get into this in a minute, was that a lot of his property was taken. Now, during September 3rd or September 4th, when Washington was over at the Benjamin Ring House, which is about not even a quarter-mile away, Lafayette stayed here. Now Lafayette, this was his first engagement in America. He was a young man. He was 19 or 20 years old. He never saw battle yet. Now he was kind of as you would call it, he was a dainty type man. He was very well known in France. Now when he offered his services to the American cause, he was rejected. Lafayette came to Philadelphia on horseback with a couple of dignitaries, explaining that he wanted to give his time to the American cause. Now he went to City Hall in Philadelphia today. He knocked on the door. They rejected him. They said, "We have enough French officers, we don't want you." But what they didn't know in Philadelphia was that Benjamin Franklin himself had sent over this young person to serve in the American cause. They did not know that. Now when Benjamin Franklin sent a letter over explaining that Lafayette was here, he's a very well dignified man in France, they accepted Lafayette right away. They put him right next to Washington. Now he had to prove himself. Now Lafayette was a smart man, even as a young man. He wasn't the type that was given special privileges. He fought along his troops during the Battle of Brandywine. We'll get into that in a minute. But he stayed in this headquarters. This was his first headquarters in the New World, in America during the Revolution. Now, he would have followed the army. He would have came here. Now, Washington was making a trip to this general area early on. He came and he had dinner with Benjamin Ring, the owner of his headquarters, and which time Benjamin Ring gave him some intelligence about the area, roads, different types of hills, what they might have to do to this area. They needed to find out what was going on in this area. Now Benjamin Ring, the house we're going to visit in the next video, he was a very interesting man himself. He owned a lot of grist mills. He owned a sawmill. Now they were right along the Brandywine where the conservatory is today. Now a lot of people think that there was nothing here during the Battle of Brandywine along the creek. That was not true. There were sawmills and there was different grist mills along the Brandywine Creek. Now to get back to this house here, now during the battle, Lafayette, like I said, stayed here. But when the battle started to take place on September 11th, probably in the afternoon, this house was abandoned. There was nothing, there was nobody here. There might have been soldiers stationed around this house and a lot of reserves. It was a lot of reserves that were in this area. Now, the Quaker, the fighting Quaker, his division was here. Now, another interesting aspect about the house is that after the battle, now we talked about the battle itself, I don't want to get into it, but the British advanced this area. They took Chad's Ford. Now when they took Chad's Ford, the road in back of me here was loaded with American wagons and cannons leaving the area. They knew that the British were going to advance across the creek. Now when they did, they were pushed back. They were pushed out of this area, the Americans. So they were all in these fields retreating. They were just retreating through this area. Now the house behind me was vacant. Now during this time, when the British advanced on the area, they found out that there was a lot of livestock. The Americans left so fast that all the livestock and everything in the home was still there. They didn't take anything with them. This was a very orderly, fast retreat by the Americans, because you have 7,000 British, Hessians, and Queen's Rangers and light infantry coming across the Brandywine. So basically what happened was, after the battle, the British stayed in this area. They stayed in 2 locations. They stayed at Dilworth Town for 5 days, and also they camped in this general area on the battlefield. They would have stayed near the houses. The high-ranking officers from the British Army after the battle would have stayed in these homes. They would have stayed in the Benjamin Ring house, and they would have also stayed in Mr. Gilpin's residence. Now during this time, they were here 5 days. Now that's a long time to be stationed somewhere, waiting for something to happen. So what Howe did and Cornwallis is they refreshed their army, and after 5 days they retreated this area, and they went towards Turk's Head, which is Westchester, Pennsylvania. Now another thing about the area was that there was a lot of British dead. Now there's a cemetery over here. The cemetery dates to about 1710 as the earliest tombstone. There was most likely, I spoke to a couple individuals over there, that there might be British dead buried in the cemetery. Now they just didn't bury British dead anywhere around the house here. Only if it was necessary, which I don't think it was. They had enough time to gather their dead and bury it at the cemetery, which is right over here. Most likely they did that. Now, after the battle, they were leaving, they were packing up. The British were packing their tents up, they were getting their gear ready, they were policing up weapons. Now, what they did with this residence is Howe and Cornwallis did not give an order yet to stop raiding. So they took all their provisions out of this house. Now, Mr. Gilpin, later on in life, he was here. He made a list, an extensive list of things that were taken from this farm. Now the farm consisted of, like I said, about 200 acres, but there's a very, very long list. It includes a book, a history book, a gun, about 7 sheep, hay, wheat, all types of goods that were taken out of this house. There was farm equipment took, wagons that were taken. Now that list survives because Gilpin himself, he claimed damages after the war. Now I don't know if he was given any retribution after the war. I don't know that, but it does exist. Now, when you take things from a farm like this, it's going to be dramatic. Now this is September 11th. Now a lot of times the winter's going to be coming on. So most likely he had to get supplies from a lot of his neighbors in the area to support himself during the winter time. Now to end, Lafayette, like I said, this was Lafayette's headquarters. Around 1841, I think it was, Lafayette came back to the United States of America at that time. Now he was probably in his late 60s. Now he visited all the sites that he saw when he was in his youth. He saw the Battle of Brandywine, the field where he fought. And also he came to this residence. Lafayette came here. Now he knocked on the door and he saw Mr. Gilpin. Mr. Gilpin at that time was still alive. He was very, very old and he was on his deathbed. And he thanked Lafayette. He thanked him for all the good service he did to America, and he thanked him for not ransacking his house. He was well, you know, he was dignified. Lafayette was a very dignified man. He wouldn't have done that. But Lafayette was here during his tour of America, and he thanked Mr. Gilpin. But this residence here is significant. It still exists, which is very ironic, and it looks like it exactly would back then. Now, a couple other aspects about the area is that, like I said, the Benjamin Ring House is down here, and across the way is Washington's Hill. Now, Washington, like I said, probably was in this area, and he had a lot of aides de camp in this area, and a lot of the reserves were in this area. But this house was used during the Battle of Brandywine on September 11th, probably September 3rd to September 11th, late in the afternoon when it was taken by the British Army.